Netroots Nation, let's welcome She the People founder and president and Netroots Nation board member, Aimee Allison.
When women of color, unprecedented numbers, entered Congress this January, they didn't just make history, they have been among the most courageous, morally clear advocates for our country, leading voices on the humanitarian crisis and migrants being held at the border, leading on the Green New Deal, leading on reproductive justice, calling for reproductive rights and the defeat of the Hyde Amendment. They've been among the clearest voices calling for impeachment. And they've uplifted a standard and held the entire government accountable for the policies and practices, not just in the last 2 years, but the system that continues to cause suffering in our communities. These women of color have done more than change history. They've changed American politics. And so today, I just want to say for millions of us, the women of color who entered Congress, they're more than 4 votes. For millions of us, these women of color in Congress represent generations of blood, sweat, and tears of struggle for us to have representation. They represent the best of American democracy. And yet, if you've read the news, they've faced attacks all year from the right wing and from Democratic Party leadership. So today I'm asking you, Netroots Nation, put your hands together for our heroes who are bringing the movement to Congress. Our squad, give it up for the Congresswomen who are making a difference for us. Representative Deb Haaland, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Presley, Ilhan Omar, give it up. This is our squad. These are our people. We're going to sit right here. This is what I want to say first. You are loved. We love you. And you mean so much. Yeah, look at the sign here. Women of color lead, thanks for being bold, #bold AF. That's what I'm talking about. All right, I just want to start our conversation here, because this is very special to have you all here. I want to start the conversation by just asking a pretty simple question. I've been traveling around the country. I've talked to literally thousands of women of color all over the country. What do you say to women of color to whom you are a symbol, a great symbol of what is possible in this country, who are feeling angry, sad, frustrated, and hurt by the recent words that have minimized your impact or even villainized you or tried to say that put the work that you're doing, the critical work, on the side. In other words, try to silence the work that's being done. What do you say to women of color? What's your message to us? Understanding that we are so critical to winning back the Senate and winning the White House and in organizing and all of that. What's your message?
I think you have to be unapologetically you. And sometimes that means, I know for me and for a number of my sisters, that means we represent our districts. We focus on the things that matter in our districts. and to bring them into the space. And that does sometimes mean I have to vote no on detaining children at the border. That means standing up against the militarization of my community, which is a northern community in Southwest Detroit, and abolish ICE. That's what I stood for, that's what I ran on. And I have to be unwavering. That's what people sent me there in Congress to do, is represent them. So there's different roles for people, but one thing it is there's 650,000 people that rely on me being their voice. And I have to never back down. And that means to outwork it, to continue to keep moving forward. And at this moment, I mean, that's all I keep doing, and I want to focus on that. And you know, Aimee, I have the third poorest congressional district in the country. I have been in communities and neighborhoods where no one has ever spoken to them. Not one member of Congress, not their local elected folks, and for the first time, they feel like they have a seat at the table. That is what inspires me to continue to work hard and move forward.
I'm glad Rashida brought up the fact that she's accessible, because that's really the biggest thing for my district, for the people that I'm representing. They want to know that their congressperson is accessible. You know, there's members of Congress who never meet with their constituents, believe it or not, because they don't want to hear what they have to say to them. So I'm always open. Town halls, you know, they come to my office. I show up at the rallies. Yes, I show up at all the rallies and speak on behalf of the children who are incarcerated in those cages on the southern border, because they need our voice as much as everyone else does. So I think being accessible, listening to the people, and look, I'm a single mom. I've had to be on food stamps. I have student loans. I know what it's like to make a decision between rent and food and all of those things, just like so many people, not just in my district, but across this country. And so I know what it's like. So yes, I want to hear those stories. I want to hear what's important to my constituents, but also to all of Indian country. 573 tribes across the country who have rarely had a voice in our politics. My door is open to all of them, because they have things to say, and we need to listen.
So one of the things that I tell women of color and everyone is that we never need to ask for a permission or wait for an invitation to lead. We were sent to Washington, I believe, to lead with our values and to have an agenda that really pushes that forward. And so every single vote that we take, every single agenda we push forth is one that is rooted in the deep values that our communities have, that are about making sure no one is being left behind, no one is being negotiated out of that table, that we recognize that every single person in Congress has a role. Our role is to take our votes. Leadership's role is to wrangle votes. And so when everybody understands what their role is, then everybody succeeds. But there's a constant, I think, struggle oftentimes with people who have power about sharing that power. And we are not really in the business of asking for the share of that power. We're in the business of trying to grab that power and return it to the people so that we can push for an agenda that frees young people from the shackles of student debt, that makes sure every single American has access to health care, that young kids in our country who had parents who had to make a really difficult choice to survive are not being caged at our borders, that we are not carrying the water for this cruel administration, that we are doing the job that the people sent to us when they put us in the majority, which is to resist and insist on policies that push this country forward. That's the work that we're doing.
Well, first I just want to say thank you for each of you for being here and for the role that you play every day as disruptors, as activists, as agitators, as preservers of democracy, as foot soldiers. We couldn't do anything that we do without every single one of you. But I also want to say that we couldn't do what we do if we didn't have role models like Barbara Lee. It is true, the old adage, just because it's a cliche makes it no less true. In order to be it, you have to see it. And we have seen that strength of conviction, that willingness to disrupt in the name and the pursuit of progress and justice, the status quo, for the liberation and the emancipation of all people, but especially those historically marginalized and underserved. So Barbara, we thank you and we honor you. And I endorse everything that my sisters in service said here. And I'll just say that I ran for Congress to do this work from a place that is people-centered. I believe firmly that the people closest to the pain should be closest to the power. And I don't believe anyone is truly voiceless. I do think that there are many people who are unheard. And it's our job to create space for those voices to be heard. And that's what guides me in this work every day, not palace intrigue. I'm focused on the fact that there have been 18 shootings in my district since July 3rd. I'm focused on the fact that in a 3-mile radius in my district from Cambridge to Roxbury, life expectancy drops by 30 years and median household income by $50,000. I'm focused on the fact that as someone, and we have all governed before we were elected to Congress, and I'll just say that I'm sick and tired and weary about the full freedoms, health, and safety of Black and brown children and families being compromised, negotiated, and moderated. And that's why I'm here, to focus on the work with a capital W. So.
Okay. Several of you mentioned the humanitarian crisis at the border. 2 of you recently were at the border. We had a very small view into what you experienced. We saw a few small videos. We saw you speaking both in committee and in a press conference. But what we want to know is what you witnessed and what you believe would solve this problem immediately.
Oh, thanks, Ayanna. See, that's how we support each other. I mean, I think, you know, for me, it became very real and very personal when I saw it. I think when you are face to face with somebody that is imprisoned, just completely, completely dehumanized, to actually see it and it's on, our watch. It is very much given me fuel to continue to push forward very aggressively to shut down the camps. And I think that's the one thing that worries me about this constant back and forth, I think, in Congress among my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, even in committee, this blame game, this constant push and pull of, well, how did we get here? The fact of the matter, we're here now. So what are we gonna do to free children from the trauma, which pretty impossible at this point of how long they've been there, but what do we need to do from moving forward? But I think as a nation, we need to realize we're gonna look back at this moment as a very, very dark time. We are, not only because of who is in the White House, but more importantly because of the policies, and we're gonna look back and say, what did we do as a nation to push against this? This is a whole generation of children that will never forget what our nation did to them. They will never forget the trauma The fact that, we're holding them down and injecting them with medicine so they can stop crying. The fact that we're separating them away from their parents and telling them that their father or mother don't want them anymore. That kind of trauma is something that we all need to not look away from and to be able to combat it in a very aggressive way. And Aimee, it is hard when you walk away. I was telling you this earlier. We got to leave, we got to walk away, but I will never forget the women that I met, the father that looked me in the eyes, grabbing onto his 14-year-old son, the 4-year-old boy that I couldn't communicate but to put my tongue out at him so he can put his tongue back out on me, and just knowing that I'm just here, that I'm his friend at this moment, his advocate. But just showing up there, at least one woman was free that was pregnant, that it was her first child, and now she's with her family in Florida. But we're going to continue to show up and continue to fight back on the inside. But all of you on the outside need to continue to fuel this kind of movement to push against this ideology, because it is an ideology. It is an ideology that dehumanizing, the ideology of othering that is at stake right now. And at the forefront, they can make it about an immigration crisis, but it isn't. It's about the belief of this current administration that asylum seekers don't deserve human rights, that children don't deserve human dignity or deserve not to go through this traumatic experience. And so we all need to be joining efforts together and fighting against it together. I walked in wanting to abolish ICE, period, because of the experiences I had in my neighborhood in Southwest Detroit. But this also opened up, I think, another lens for me of realizing that this is so deep-rooted. I don't care which administration, there needs to be real comprehensive immigration reform in our country. And we just have to continue to work it and to continue to be able to humanize and put a human impact on this. It can't just be about numbers. It can't be about who to blame. It has to be about the children and the families that are devastating. It's devastating to see.
Absolutely. I would also just say that not only do we need you all to remain engaged and mobilized and not to look away, this is the opportunity for us to be inclusive and intentional in our movement and our coalition building. What I see a lot is that, we amplify the cruelty that's happening at the border, and then other people say, what about the cruelty we're experiencing? The point is that violence begets violence, trauma begets trauma, oppression begets oppression, and we need to be, anyone who cares about the mass incarceration, the injustice and the epidemic that is mass incarceration should care about this. And I'm going to tell you why. Because what's happening in these ICE facilities is a petri dish where they pilot how they can abuse privacy rights, how they can abuse human rights, and they scale that up. And then I'm going to take it one step further. What we learned in El Paso, and the reason why there was great resistance, and I learned a long time ago, it's not that people are averse to change, they are resistant to loss. And I said, what are folks so angry about? What do they think they will lose? Well, we found out in El Paso, because many of the families there, their only opportunity or pathway to social and economic freedom, to economic mobility, to the middle class, is to work for CBP. And people were angry at us because we were taking away their neighbors' jobs with our calls to abolish ICE and to not want to continue to feed a system that criminalizes people for doing something that is a legal and human right, and that is to seek asylum. But I want to make sure you all understand that. So disproportionately, Black and brown people, because you don't even need a high school diploma to be a CBP officer, their only pathway to the middle class is to work for CBP. And they are now a part of this larger machine, a cog, in the oppression and incarceration of people who look just like them. So we need to be inclusive and intentional in our coalition, in our movement building, and we do need, we need to create a system that is, that works, that is humane, that is compassionate, that allows people to seek asylum, to settle into community while we're awaiting review of their case, and that keeps families together. And that's across the board, across the board. Okay?
Yeah, and I think a lot of us here in this room are wondering what can be done immediately. I'm part of conversations and people are brainstorming. We've seen even in the last week there's been protests and people are continuing to brainstorm. From your perspective, Congresswoman, what are your sense of what could be done right away?
I think first we have to understand what Rashida and Ayanna were talking about. How did we get here, right? We got here, one, because of some of the policies that this administration has implemented. So that's the metering policy that we have in place, that's the family separation that we have in place, the stay in Mexico policies. All of these policies contribute to this crisis that started out as a manufactured crisis. But even beyond that, we have to think about what is causing this mass migration, right? That's our policies towards the Northern Triangle, and trying to make sure that we can have a serious conversation in regards to how some of our foreign policy has contributed to this mass migration. And what are some policies that we could put in place to take care of that? So what we're doing is we're proposing legislation to help with what's taking place in the Northern Triangle, to roll back some of the policies that have led to this mass migration. We are implementing policies we're proposing policies that are going to roll back some of these cruel policies that this administration is putting in place. But none of these things are going to be possible if there isn't a mass movement in the recognition of the dignity and the humanity of the people who are at our borders. People oftentimes will say, you have to go to a port of entry. If you go to a port of entry, and the country that you are at the port of entry of does not recognize your right to seek asylum, it is a human thing for you to figure out how you bypass that process in order for you to survive. That is just human. So as someone, right, who had parents who had to make that decision on how to cross a border in order for me to survive and be here today, I understand the kind of choices that some of these families are faced with. And as the beautiful poet from Somalia, Warsan Shire says, no one goes to the mouth of the shark unless the mouth of the shark is safer than home. And so some of these people who are in this administration, who are our colleagues, what they fail to understand is that these people are faced with cruel decisions, inhumane decisions on what they should do to make their children's lives better and what they should do to make their own lives better. And instead of us saying, here is A, B, and C, we're saying there is zero option. And if you ever think that you have a chance, we're going to treat you worse than a dog. One of our members said to me, if there were dogs in those cages, every single member of Congress would vote to make sure that all of these cages didn't exist anymore. So we live in a society and govern in a body that might value the life of a dog more than they value the life of a child who might not look like theirs. And that is completely sad. And we can't allow, I don't have the values to allow me to vote and continue the implementation of that because somebody could get a soap or a noodle or maybe a glass of water. I have values that says we shouldn't even have this to begin with. And I am going to do everything
Aimee,
that
can I
is
just say something?
possible
Because at
to
the
make
end of
sure
the
that's
day,
not happening.
if we improve the conditions of a child in a cage, they are still in a cage. Are you opposed to the criminalizing and the vilifying of people and families that are just moving? If you were on an airplane, if you flew here, and there was a baby crying on that plane, you wouldn't ask where that baby was from. You wouldn't ask if it was sick. You wouldn't know its name. But everyone on the plane offers advice to lull, to comfort, and to quiet that child. These are all our children, and we should be doing the same damn thing.
That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it.
And ICE is knocking on doors right now. So I do want to say that we keep talking about the border. Yes, border communities are disproportionately impacted, and we are seeing mass migration, and because of the criminalizing, mass incarceration and mass deportation. However, my district is 40% immigrant, and ICE is knocking doors right now.
That's right. Right. So it's an urgent problem now. And it's also been a problem for generations. I'm looking at you, Congressman Haaland, because it's not just what's happening now, but it's the system that was set up. Family separation in slavery, and family separation among Native people.
Well, you have more control over people when you separate them, of course. My grandmother, and I know there's Native folks in the audience today now. In fact, I want to give a shout out to my sister Ruth Anna Buffalo. Remember that horrible law that disenfranchised all the Native Americans in North Dakota? She beat him. She beat him. She beat him. Women of color rising up to make right with our people. But yes, my grandmother, when she was 8 years old, was taken to boarding school over 100 miles away from her community. And her father only got to visit her twice because his only mode of transportation was a horse and a wagon. And this is the thing, they took him to boarding school. Do you think they taught him math and science? No, they taught him how to iron clothes and clean churches and things like that. So it's been happening for a long, long time. You have more control over people when you can separate them. You have control over children when you can separate the children from their parents. And it didn't work then, and it's not working now.
I want to stay with you because you have legislation a lot of people may not be aware of. In the context, national conversation among presidential candidates and in Congress, there's actual legislation addressing the study of reparations for those in that ancestors were affected by enslavement. You're doing a similar kind of legislation for those who were impacted by Wounded Knee. Can you tell us more about reparations for Native people?
Sure, yes. So I want to say, and my sister Barbara Lee, actually I should call her my auntie. She's sitting here with us. The voice for all of us, for women of color. Yes, we need to have a conversation about reparations. Yes, we need to pass that legislation, which I proudly signed on to. But there's also, on the spectrum of healing, me, along with two of my colleagues, Denny Heck and Paul Cook, who is a Republican and a Marine, we introduced legislation to revoke the Medals of Honor from the cavalry who massacred the women and children at Wounded Knee over 100 years ago. Because you don't deserve to be recognized with the highest medal in our country for killing women and children. And it doesn't matter if it happened yesterday or over 100 years ago. It's not right, and that's one way that our country can start healing. This country was founded on genocide of Indian people.
That's right.
And until everyone in this country understands and knows the history of our country, it's very difficult to heal something when you're in denial over it. So that's something I think look, we're all working as hard as we can to make sure that we're fighting for the people who need a voice and who need somebody to fight for them. We need to pay attention to so much, and so that's part of it. Another issue we're trying to rectify in Congress is to recognize that our capital, well, in fact, where we're sitting right now, this is Indian land. Our capital was built on Indian land, but yet there's hardly any reference to Native Americans anywhere in the United States Capitol. There's paintings and there's reliefs and there's racist, clearly racist and horrible repainting of history all over the Capitol, and we need to recognize that Native Americans also spent their blood, sweat, and tears so that all of us, every single one of us, could be sitting in this country as the United States today.
Yes. Yes. Representative Tlaib, I have to ask you, because we first met a while ago. You were on my podcast. You were in your primary. And you said back then that your commitment was to push for impeachment. Back then. Where does that stand now? Is it possible for us?
We're going to impeach the MFer, don't worry. So let me tell you. No, we're going to impeach him. No, because it's up to you. It's not up to us. It's up to you. We went from, let's not talk about it, to close to 80 members of Congress coming out and supporting an impeachment inquiry into this president. But one of the things, Aimee, I think all of us have been talking about, we've been talking about all of these things that we've been talking about. Everything is centered around this ideology that has now reached the Oval Office. This ideology that right now, to me, goes against completely the values of our country, but more importantly, is directly, I believe, at my core, is directly in violation of the United States Constitution. When you have a crooked CEO that has an upgraded version of pay-to-play in the White House right now, he literally every single day is intertwining the Trump organization with the Trump administration and literally giving out contracts, everything, and it needs to be investigated, because even when you look at these detention camps, look who is making the money. Look who is funding it. Because if you look at Trump's inauguration committee, you will see two of the companies that funded his inauguration committee is now benefiting from caging up children at the border. When you see the kind of dismantling of the EPA, of civil rights, of what they're doing on HUD, everything from housing to everything that touches our district is based on this ideology that is completely against the United States Constitution, and he does it. And you all know this. He does it dismissing the co-equal branch of the United States Congress. He does it just arrogantly. I don't care about you people. I'm gonna run it like a business. This is my business. No, it isn't. This is the United States government. This is a country, not a business. You need to act like the government is about people. And I gotta tell you, being a woman of color in Congress and coming out so forward about this is I'm also a Muslimah in this country, and I'm raising 2 Muslim boys in this country. When you have somebody going around, curting around, using the Supreme Court to sit there and base a bill on religious discrimination. Think about it. Right now, our country has a Muslim ban. They can call it whatever they want, but they are preventing people solely based on their faith. Again, an ideology. Again, completely at its core, deep down, these are impeachable offenses. If you dig deep, you will find out that the census question that he was trying to push was all about diminishing people of color from getting counted. And so, I will not back down impeaching this lawless president. He will not be above the law and get away with it on my watch or any of the other people's watch that are in Congress right now calling for impeachment. Stay strong. Stay strong on this, because this is a time that if we don't call him out, if we don't push for this, if we don't make our government work for us in holding this president accountable, who is going to be the next crooked CEO that runs for president? And you know they're coming. You know they're coming. And they can't get away with it, because if they do, endangers our true core of our democracy in our country. And I can't let this go.
Preach.
I love Barbara Lee. Let me tell you. No. This is so true. I want you all to know.
Barbara speaks for me.
I know, but you all need to know. This is a woman that, yes, everybody thinks I'm a millennial. I am not a millennial. I love Ayanna goes, let them think you're a millennial. I was like, well, there's this generation. You did. One time you told me, let them believe you're a millennial. I gotta tell you, there is a moment where you come into this massive institution and you feel almost alone, even though you're surrounded by people. But that beautiful woman, that beautiful spirit, I mean, Congresswoman Lee meets with me monthly. She guides and supports me. I want you to know how much I love that about you. I love you. You're my sister forever. I will never forget that you opened your arms to someone like me. Thank you.
There's so much spirit, heart, courage, and just
little
fierceness.
Southwest Detroit side comes out of me when you talk about the president, so I apologize.
Please, okay, Representative Omar, I gotta ask, because I just want to stay on this in terms of accountability, based on the committee that you sit on and based on the work that you're doing. What can we do to support your work and the work of those on stage and in Congress, holding the White House, the Senate accountable for what they're doing right now?
As the fierce Barbara Lee would say, stay woke. I think it's really important for us not to normalize the behavior of this president and this administration. There are so many things. He's the king of distraction, right? It's a constant pile of garbage that comes out of his mouth, the mouths of the people that speak for him, his administration, whether it is written or spoken. And for so many of us, sometimes it sort of offends your conscience. You just kind of want to like shut it off and say, no, this isn't real, this isn't happening.
Or you like try to dismiss it, or you try to dismiss it like he's not this.
Exactly. My daughter, my youngest kid, who just turned 7, would hear his voice in the car or on TV, and one of the things she always would say is like, does he know he's president? And there is just this sort of absurdity, I think, in the way that he behaves and in the way everybody is behaving around him. He sort of has pushed us down to a level of elementary, I think it's not even elementary, it's like preschool playground, right? Like push you down the sandbox kind of like garbage, childish crap. And so, but in it is hidden a very calculated, driven, strategic ideology that because we are paying attention and disgusted by the child's play, we don't get to really understand the cruelty of some of the policies that they're slowly implementing. So the Muslim ban is one of them, right? We know that their attempt to put citizenship on the census is one of them. What's happening at the border is another. What they're doing with our foreign policy in regards to Venezuela, Iran, Yemen, all of these policies, we often don't get to have a clear debate about the people he's appointing to lead in these areas as an envoy. Which is why I lost my mind when Elliot Abrams came to my committee.
Okay, let's just
right?
stop.
Like it is just.
I want to pause there because that was the moment when you spoke out against outside influence on the committee, the role of AIPAC and all that, that the attacks on you, the threats on you, not only from people in the administration, but from writ large, the white supremacists out there. Since you spoke out about something that was supposedly the third rail, the way that I'd interpret it from the outside was that you were being punished not only from the other party, but even we heard from people in the Democratic Party for calling attention to that. That happened, it was an outcry. Where does that stand now in terms of making the space to be able to, as an elected representative, call out this kind of thing?
Oh, I create my space. Listen, here is the hard truth. The hard truth is that no one who has my experience, collectively in all of the marginalized identities that I carry, has ever set foot on the halls of Congress. On the Foreign Affairs Committee, every single thing that's debated, whether it is the kind of aid we're going to send, whether it is, how we're going to support refugees, whether it is proxy wars in Africa, whether it is the division of the African continent, all of these policies that have sort of impacted my life in the most detrimental ways that have brought me to the United States, all of these were debated in that committee. And every single person who looks like me, who has had my lived experience at some point or another, has watched that committee and screamed at that TV and said, "Ask this question." And so when I get the opportunity to sit there and look at this man in the face, knowing the kind of history he's had and how he's lied and was convicted because he lied to Congress, and the trail of blood that he has left in South and Central America, that I wasn't gonna let him get away and come in to talk to us about what he was gonna do in Venezuela, knowing his history. I was going to ask the questions that every single person sitting in front of that TV wanted to ask, because now they get to be in that room and they get to shout in their face.
That's right, that's right. I wanted to ask you, Ayanna Presley, about the work that you're doing, because we're in the context of the right-wing organizing around abortion rights at the state level, state legislatures passing abortion bans, or at least pushing that idea. And in Congress, you're working on a whole slew of legislation that not only protects choice, but also protects broadly people from sexual violence. What is the latest work that you're doing legislatively to really make the Me Too movement the law of the land?
Okay, I'm gonna try to do that, but there's 2 minutes left here, okay? So I just wanted to just answer your question 2 questions ago and just say, listen, moving forward, I'm just appealing to all of you to recognize that our destinies and our freedoms are tied. Please do not feed any scarcity mindset. Now is not the time to be territorial about oppression and trauma because this is a coordinated, systemic attack, and we are all losing. But the good news is we can all win. But we have to continue to resist and be mobilized and be together, and just don't allow them to divide us, because our destinies and our freedoms are tied. What I want to say, what these women have done up here, yes, I do quote Shirley Chisholm a lot, who said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair. But I've amended that, because I don't want to bring a chair to an old table. This is the time to shake the table. This is the time to redefine that table. Because if you're going to come to this table, and for all of you that have aspirations of running for office, for whatever lived experience and identity that you represent, if you are not prepared to come to that table and to represent that voice, don't come. Because we don't need any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. We don't need black faces that don't want to be a black voice. We don't need Muslims that don't want to be a Muslim voice. We don't need queers that don't want to be a queer voice. Come on, speak it. And if you're worried about being marginalized and stereotyped, please don't even show up. Because we need you to represent that voice. The midterm elections of 2018, they spoke a lot about each of our magic. I would never give short shrift to any of our magic, but this is work, and we put it in every day. And so the last thing I want to say is that yes, because they are coming, this is a coordinated attack. Reproductive justice is certainly a part of that. It is coordinated. They've been playing the long game for a long time, coming after our courts, our state legislatures. I am the chair of the Abortion Access Task Force, appointed under our pro-choice caucus. This is the first, thanks to Barbara Lee, and this is the first Democratic majority pro-choice Congress in our history. And the fact that that is true at a time when the most draconian, oppressive, life-threatening, family-separating policies are being rolled out against the backdrop of this first pro-choice majority Congress, we're not standing for it, and we're going to attack it and resist it at every level. From our courts, we'll be on amicus briefs. I've introduced a resolution restoring an individual's right, constitutional right to abortion. Abortion is health care. Abortion is health care, period.
Right, that's it.
Okay?
That's it.
So we'll keep fighting, but we need all of you to keep doing it right alongside us.
Come on now. All right, now.
Can I add a quick thing?
Shake the table.
Shake the table. I just wanted to add, I think it's really important for us to bring my sister Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in this room, who's not here with us. And one of the things I think that those of us who didn't just come to bring a chair, but came to shake the table, learned from the courageous Barbara Lee, is that you have to be conscious about leading with more clarity and courage. Because every single person who has a vested interest in voting for you wants to make sure that you are there taking the votes on their behalf and not on the behalf of a special interest. And so more of our policies are going to be implemented if we have more people that operate that way. And more of those people will only come when we have you guys running for office with a platform that says, this is going to be a country of the people, for the people, that is governed with justice in mind. So thank you.
Repeal
And I just, we're almost out of time. I really want to hear from both representatives at the end. Just for 1 minute, how can the progressive movement that this room represents, not just the people sitting here, but all of the networks that we bring in with us. How can we help uplift and support your leadership, your courage, your governance right now?
So I want to, this might be a good time for me to say, I don't know if it answers your question specifically, but I won my election. First of all, I was rated by Indivisible, Nob Hill, and Albuquerque as the most progressive candidate in my primary, which I was very honored. I won my primary. I'm in a +7 Democratic district, and I won my general election by 23 points. All that to say that I ran on an unapologetically progressive platform, and Republicans voted for me. Independents voted for me. Moderate Democrats voted for me. Our platform resonates with people across the country. It's our responsibility to make sure that they are hearing our platform, that we're talking to those people, that we do not leave anyone out. This will be a year of inclusion for every single American who's been sidelined by the economic injustice that so many of us are experiencing now and have experienced for centuries.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
So it's our job to make sure that you're talking to every single person that you can. You're in line at the grocery store, talk to somebody. You're in line at the post office, talk to somebody. You know how many people I've gotten to come to my events because I've been in line at the post office? Come on now. It's our responsibility to make sure that every single voter in this country, and you all need to register voters also, regardless of how you do it, know that our candidates, our progressive candidates, they stand for every single American. You do not have to be a progressive to vote for one. So let's make sure we get it done.
Okay, you got a final word. Yes.
And it's really important. Look, I was you. I know you don't believe me. I really was. And I still will. Shit, I'll sit in front of trucks and they won't go through my neighborhood because I have 5 children who have asthma in the neighborhood I grew up in. I will do that activism work, the bold work, the courage that you all put towards all of these movements is so important. And I want you to run for office. And like my girl, Sayu always says, people like us need to run for office. That's what's wrong with the institutions right now. But one of the things that is important, yes, we're there. We're all there. But don't leave us alone. Don't think, well, they've got it. No. The strategy needs to be an extension of what you all are doing. Still come to us. Still motivate us. Like, I want to repeal the GOP tax plan and put Boost Act at the front so I can get $3,000 to $6,000 back in the pockets of real people, everyday Americans that just have been left behind. So it only happens if you're lifting up the work, but it's also making us do the work. Don't leave us alone and think that's it. We can't do it that way. It doesn't happen that way. Grace Lee Boggs from Detroit always said the movement work, the movement from civil rights to women's rights didn't happen in the halls of Congress. It happened in the streets, on the ground, in movement work, always. And again, coming from this activism world and working at human services agencies and community organizations, I learned early on, bring people into the room that can't be in the room. Do that in your work every single day. Bring people in the room, even if you whisper it to yourself. If I whisper to myself, my 14-year-old boy, Adam is in this room, what do I want him to hear? Do that every single time in the work that you do. And lastly, bringing somebody in the room. Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, bringing her into the room, because let me tell you, this is a woman, she ran on saying unboss, unbought. Before we all came along, she was like radical to everybody else, right? Look at that bold woman. And she said, children can't learn if they're hungry. She wanted free lunches for kids in schools. People said, can't happen, nope. You know what we hear now about everything that we're trying to do. But you know what we got today? Free lunches for kids in schools, so don't give up.
This is the heart. This is the spirit. This is the leadership that's taking our movement to the halls of Congress. Give it up for the women of our squad. Our squad. This is our squad.